I will say the one exception to that is the rush defense. So all that to say, this area right here, there's two areas where Notre Dame has to get better. One, we've talked about, limit the big plays that are coming from blown assignments. Like, clean that stuff up. You've had like 5 of them all year. Clean that stuff up. That's got to be fixed now. The second one is the rush defense has not been good. And it's been an assignment standpoint from the linebackers, but there have also been times where teams have gotten movement that makes me not like what I'm seeing from the defensive line as well. Yep. This is the area that has to get better, and this is a game that they should get better because Stanford, we talked about context. Stanford, through the first 2 games of the season, Ryan, they had 169 yards against Colgate. And a Colgate alum said, thanks for not making fun of the school and the toothpaste thing. I like saying that's kind of low-hanging fruit. So we're not going to go there.
I did that like 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I'm guilty of that.
So we're not going to do that anymore. But Stanford, after the first 2 games, is averaging 195 rushing yards per game.
Yeah.
Then E.J. Smith got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, they've gone for 86 against Washington. They went for 127 against Oregon, and they went for 90 against Oregon State. That's 101 yards per game. They averaged 2.4 yards per attempt against Washington. They went for 3.7 against Oregon and 3.3 against Oregon State. Since EJ's been out, and as teams have kind of gotten used to that long mesh thing that they're doing, their run game has gone back to what it was last year, which is not good. And to make matters worse, Miles Hinton is coming back. Not 100%. He's missed the last 2 games, but the entire left side of their offensive line is out for this game. David Shaw reported, I think, yesterday.
Oh, man.
So Walter Rouse is out, and I'm trying to remember who the name of their left guard is, Ryan. Can you help me out with this one? Their left guard's name is Jake Hornibrook.
Yes.
Yes.
I remember I looked at that name, and I was like, I wonder if he's related to Alex Hornibrook that used to play for Wisconsin. I don't know if the answer to that.
I believe he is. But he was related to a kid that played at Clemson as well.
Gotcha.
That
seems like a pretty rare name. Like I haven't met too many Hornibrooks in my lifetime.
So not only is Stanford not good at running the football, but Stanford's going to be out 2 of their starting offensive linemen, and their best offensive lineman is coming back from an injury, which means he's unlikely that he's 100%.
Sure.
So this is flat out. This is the ultimate get right game for the Notre Dame rush defense, which it looked like it was ascending. That's the frustrating thing about last week. We talked about the overall team. Don't take a step back, right? And so Notre Dame took a step back. Now, I will say this. Breaking down the film, there were some mistakes made in that game. If we're going to make some excuses, no Jacob Lacey, no Howard Cross, that matters.
Sure.
And number 2, I felt like you look at the game plan, I felt like Notre Dame was okay. If you want to try to run the ball on us, run the ball on us. We're not going to let Jaron Hall beat us. And they didn't. Because BYU's not a great running team. So Notre Dame was willing to give a little bit in that as long as it meant they weren't throwing the ball over your head. And outside of one play, they didn't throw it over their head. And so I think schematically there was a little purpose to allowing BYU. Now, within that, there was bad execution, to your point, right? Which you broke down on Monday night. I don't think they were saying, hey, we'll give up 160 rushing yards. We're okay with that. No, they were just willing to, look, if you want to try to run it on us, you can run it on us. You can try and run it on us. If they would have cleaned up a couple plays, it would have been even better. The 3rd and long and then the touchdown run were two horrible plays. Outside of that, they got a 12-yard run here, 8-yard run here, but they weren't like ripping Notre Dame up. So you still got to clean some stuff up. But this is the kind of game where you've got to be able to do that. You've got to be able to make Stanford one-dimensional. Stanford does not have the weapons on the perimeter to beat you if they're one-dimensional. They can 100%. Beat you if there's some balance. And so they've got to dominate the line of scrimmage. They've got to shut down the run game. It's just like the North Carolina game. We've said this now 3 weeks in a row. They've played good. The best thing you can do to stop a good passing team is not let them have any kind of running attack. Where you can just then game plan for their pass game. And that means the defensive line, Howard Cross, I expect him to be back this week. The defensive line has got to figure out who's going to play. Gabriel Rubio is going to learn from the issues he had last week at times. The defensive line's got to dominate this game, Ryan. Absolutely has to dominate this game. And they've got to make – because you can't scheme to stop the run. When we talk about shutting down the run game of a team that likes to throw the ball, it's got to happen from your – it's basically your box, right? So it's like your Mike Will and your inside backers. Your interior defensive linemen and your edge players. It's got to be that. It can't be run fits from the 2nd, 3rd level, and your Rover's got to be contracting down. It's got to be in the box, you dominate. And that's going to be the key to this game for me.
Well, and Brian, that was like the thing I was going to start with, with this conversation is you see these numbers for Stanford, they're bad, right? Like they're not good numbers. And that's even misleading because of what E.J. Smith was doing early on in the season. Like he's a really good running back. Right now, they don't have a guy that's a difference maker at the running back position. They don't. Like the what's his name? Filkins, I think is the running back that's
Casey
playing.
Filkins, yeah.
Casey Filkins. Then they have Robinson as their backup. Their key backup at the running back position.
Yeah,
and if you watch them, Caleb. If you watch them on film, they are very one notes. They're not going to they're not going to create a bunch of explosive plays, right? Like that's not their game. That's not their game. I think Filkins is averaging like 4.1 yards a carry. Like he's a very keep it moving type of running back, right? Mm-hmm. So I think for me, these numbers, Notre Dame needs to come out of this football game with us talking about how those rushing numbers on their side of things are a lot better next week, right? Like they cannot have a performance where your ungapped sound and you give up a long run or something like that. Like this cannot be the game where there's those stupid plays where you shoot yourself in the foot because you're not doing your job, right? We need a good, cohesive ability to stop the run this week against Notre Dame. And to your point, and I agree with it 100%, Notre Dame defensive line-wise, like Isaiah Foskey, but like for instance, right? Isaiah's had done a really good job the last couple weeks, especially I think in the run game, setting firm edge, being physical with his hand usage, all that good stuff. In this game, whether it's against a under less than 100% Miles Hinton or a backup left tackle, whether that is Barrett Miller or whoever it ends up being the starting offensive tackle there, you have to dominate that football game, man. Yeah. We've been talking about you all offseason and even until now about potential first-round pick, dominant football player, all these things, which he is. He has to show it in this game, man. Right. Like, this can't be a game where he's just invisible for parts of this game. Like, you need to dominate this game. We've talked a ton about Jason Adamalola, right? With Hornibrook out and the interior offensive line just not being very good in general, even when he does play.
Would you say he was their best interior lineman so far this year, Hornibrook?
Him or Nugent, I guess. Yeah.
Center,
I mean, they're both okay players. Like, they're not bad football players, but especially with that unit having a player down, I mean, Jason Adamalola needs to dominate this football game. Power Cross is near 100%. He needs to dominate this football game. You need to see the defensive linemen absolutely come out of this game and say, like, Stanford offensive line-wise had nothing for that group. They had nothing for him. Like, there's no excuses in this game. This is one where you're playing a bad unit overall, offensive line-wise. They have not been a good unit, and they're down two of their starters. Like, there is zero excuses for this to not be a dominant performance by this defensive line and this front seven. Notre Dame needs to play a lot better than they have been on the second level especially, but it all starts, to your points, with the defensive line dominating this football game.
Ryan, the chat has gone off the rails. Anthony Solomon said, so Brian is advocating for Pine to run the triple option. Mark Brown said Brian needs to get over his love for the triple option. I don't know what started all that or what I said.
Did you say something about the triple option?
I have no idea. But the chat has gone off the rails talking about the triple option. So I don't know what I said to say that. But Ryan, I think you nailed the analysis of this. And the one thing I'll add, where the second level and third level, when I say second level, the prim, so the rover, safeties, and corners, where they need to be good against the run, is on the stuff with the tight ends and the reverses. Because here to show you how it's even worse, E.J. Smith was averaging 6.9 yards per carry. Because he was, like you said, the one note guy. E.J. could hammer it up the middle, but he was really smooth. He had great feet. He had a couple cutbacks against USC where I'm like, I didn't know he could do that. Like, he was an okay player in high school. I didn't love EJ coming to high school. We had some cuts. I'm like, boy, that kid's got a chance to finally get Stanford out of it doldrums as a rushing team. Since he's been hurt, it's been bad. Filkins is averaging 4.1 yards per carry. Robinson, you mentioned, is averaging 3.1 yards per carry. The number 3 back, Brendan Barrows, averaging 4.17 yards per carry. That's on 6 carries. Here's where they've found success rushing the football. Benjamin Urasek, their tight end, has a 50-yard gain on a reverse.
Yeah.
Michael Wilson, their wide receiver, has 3 carries for 40 yards, and Elijah Higgins has a carry for 18 yards. You take those wide receivers. I'm actually going to do that now that I'm thinking about it. I'm going to take those plays out of the equation And Stanford is averaging, let's see here, on the season, 117 yards per game. And I'm going to take one, so I got to take 5 carries out of it. They're averaging 3.5 yards per carry. You take the tight end and reverses and stuff out of the equation, they go from 4.1 per carry to 3.5. They go from 138.6 per game to 117. That's where the third level in the perimeter can be effective is be disciplined.
Yes.
Right? Be disciplined. Because Casey Filkins is not beating you on the perimeter. At least he shouldn't. It's going to be a bad sign if he does. Where they can hurt you on the perimeters with the jets and the reverses. So being smart in that regard is going to be the key for that one.